Hey again, this is Jeremy on another kind of episode. The feedback I got from a few users was that maybe I should split the episodes into basically separate ones between the list review and the kind of like core concept discussion about the book. So the major episodes will be covering core concepts and abstract concepts of what I think are important for the game in terms of strategy and tactics. And then these second episodes are going to be kind of piggybacking the relevant episode of that week, but mostly just to talk about specific army lists, which are kind of like an example of the core concept we're going to cover. So in this week, and at the end, you can go find the video on my page. This is where we talked about decentralized and centralized centralized threats and how they're important for list creation and how you should think about them when you design army list. And this is, in this case, we're going to go over an example of that with this Soulblight Gravelord Vyrkos Deathrattle army. The idea here for these kind of like pseudo secondary episodes is to talk about like mostly like put the concepts and applications, but also like to just talk about a really cool like army designs that I think I want to play personally, and I will be playing, and also for to share that across the community. So for that regard, we are going to go straight into the list here. So the army list is basically a Vyrkos Deathrattle concept, and what that means is that it is Soulblight Gravelord, obviously, Vyrkos Dynasty, and it's surrounded by the kind of the MSU foot hero concept that Soulblight can bring with like basically MSU type units, and as well as like effectively diversified or decentralized threat matrix. And so for continuation from the episode, what that means, for those who just might be catching this episode's directly in summary, is that you want your army to have effectively units that require zero to little opportunity cost in designing how there are threats on the table. And threat doesn't necessarily mean the ability to kill something. It doesn't mean hitting power. It literally just means like what is its presence on the board state. Meaning like, does your opponent want to give it ground? Does it not want to give it ground? Does it try, basically in the concept, like, does it want to keep away from this threat? Does he care about this threat? Like, literally, it doesn't even have to be the engagement. It has to be about what it can do to the decision making of your opponent. Basically, that's what a threat is in AOS conceptually. Most people, I think, simplify them down to like just killing things, but in this case, it's just about what it can basically do to the board state without actually necessarily being engaged. And the difference between a centralized threat and a decentralized threat is that a centralized threat requires basically this kind of force multiplying effect that you build the list around. And a decentralized threat list is about like, how do I basically build this threat with zero opportunity, like basically as little kind of synergistic cost to the army design. And you'll see this basically kind of apparent. The key component for why this is decentralized is you have units like Radukar the Beast. You have the Cado Ezechiar, and then you have your 20 Grave Guards. You have your two Vargskyrs, and then you have basically the two the one Vampire Lord on foot, and you have the Wight King on foot, which you can argue are not necessarily like super threatening units, but the whole point is that they are very low investments, and they buff up some of your other minor, like the decentralized threat, almost very little. So while it is a decentralized threat list, it still like has some synergistic means to make it like threatening. The other reason why you want to play a decentralized threat list versus a kind of like not necessarily solely decentralized, but like why you want to take decentralizing threats is because most armies that are basically kind of centralized play in a very castle-like formation, and decentralized threats from a construct of the table let you basically have different vectors of attack that so these castle armies can't really basically or restricted upon. Like they're more like linear in terms of like, hey, this is where my death ball is. It needs to go that way to score points, so it's gonna go that way. A decentralized threat army can be like, I don't necessarily have to completely engage myself in this kind of linear path. I can choose the various threats. I can find on multiple fronts from the abstract. And this list does this very well, right? Because you have your Graveguards and your Wight King who can just basically pop out anywhere effectively on the table if you place your Graveguards correctly. You have your Vargskyr and Radukar, which in Cado, which basically can engage multiple vectors on the table. And the really cool thing about the Vargskyrs and those two heroes specifically is because they're not necessarily the most hitting, they're not beat stick heroes, but they're above the average unit output. And since they're single model units, they're pretty speedy in a sense. Your Radukar basically gets to run and charge. Cado can choose to move fairly fast distance and flies, or he can choose beat stick mode and so forth. And then the Vargskyr, I didn't on the list. I'm sorry. Cado is supposed to have Pinions, so in case you need that extra speed while you go into your beast mode with him, you have that distance. And the Vargskyrs are there to basically help support those heroes. And what I mean by help support, I don't necessarily mean they add the punch, but if you see blocks of infantry that you're trying to target, if you can effectively corner hit them with, let's say, the Vargskyr and your one hero, you're preventing these units from being able to effectively pile in necessarily into maximizing their hitting powers into those. And that really props up their durability. And it also props up their ability to just basically lock enemy units in position states into these weird combos. So even though you might not be able to necessarily kill them, you might be disrupting their game plan so heavily. Okay, so sorry, I'm distracted. I'm rambling about the abstract reasons why this list is cool. But let's go into the finer detail of how it works. Okay, so Vyrkos Dynasty, Vyrkos sub-allegiance mechanics are you get to reroll all your cast rolls, which is the only thing that really matters, and you get +1 to wound for all your kind of Deathrattle and Deadwalker units if they're wholly even 9 of Vyrkos Vampire Lord, or Vampire basically keyword. Which are the Vampire keyword in this army? Radukar the Beast, Belladamma Volga, the Vampire Lord, and that's it. So you have 3 vampires on the table that can buff up those. Now we'll go into why there's a Wight King, because I've explained everything but Cado and the Wight King. The Wight King is in the list because it makes the Graveguard battle line, and we'll go into why that matters in a bit. So the other reasons why you take Vyrkos is mostly you typically take them for artifacts. They have some pretty decent ones. They have a really good command trait. They have good command traits, but they have 2 really good ones, Pack Master, or Pack Alpha, sorry. And then you have one that's called Driven by Deathstench, which is lets you reroll all charges, which is what the Wight King has for Vyrkos units whole even 9. Pack Alpha, for context, is basically gives that hero the ability to use a command ability for free every turn, which is super cool because it effectively adds potentially 10 extra command points during the game. And the last one is just basically lets you summon 5 wolves for free, which is nice. It's a pretty nice investment. Those are all great command traits. The artifacts are also pretty good. We're just not going to talk about them because we're not really using them for this concept, so it doesn't really matter. Going straight into why you should play Soulblight as a generalized statement. Their battle tactics are pretty good. They have one battle tactic where basically it triggers if your general triggers the hunger, or if 2 vampires trigger the hunger, or heal wounds through the hunger, which is really powerful and easy to get because we have effectively 4 vampires that could potentially do it. They're not generals. It has to be your chosen general because technically Radukar and Belladamma are War Masters, but it has to be your chosen general. They have a battle tactic that lets you score if you sacrifice a summonable unit to an enemy unit. So if you at the start of the round, if that unit's out of combat, you can basically say pick that one, and if it gets killed by the end of that turn, you score it. Really, really easy to score, especially in the later half of the game once you start respawning units. So the Soulblight allegiance mechanic. And for the new folks who don't know what that is, Soulblight also have a couple additional mechanics on top of the Vyrkos ones that I haven't covered. One of them is effectively your summonable units, which is your Graveguards, Deathrattle, Skeletons, Dire Wolves, and Zombies, and then maybe a few more. I forgot off the top of my head. They can come back. You can recycle units that are dead on a successful roll that's modified based on enemy units you killed at the end of every battle shock phase, or start of every battle shock phase, which means in your opponent's and your turn. So you have effectively 10 chances at respawning units throughout the game. And that's really powerful because they can, they're coming back at half strength, so lower count. They can only come back once, but it works really well with that battle tactic. It also can stop your opponent from scoring objectives, which during their turn, which is fucking amazing. It sets up units for maybe reaching objectives that your opponent was trying to basically block you out with deck chair units, which is really great. Anyway, just great allegiance mechanic. The other ones are your Deathrattle plus your Deathwalker can give up to -2 brave to enemy units within 6, which is really cool. It's mostly because while Battle Shock usually doesn't matter a lot of games, in some cases it does. Like against some matchups against Chaos, you'll see Battle Shock mattering more than some of the other matchups, but it's nice to have. It's a nice little kind of pick me up. And then they have the Gravesite mechanic, which is you get to place 4 points on the table. You get a 6-up ward if you're holding within 12 of it, and then for all your except for your heroes, which also do the same thing, or 12 inches. But that's where your units can basically appear from reserve, or that's where they can respawn by, as long as they're 9 inches away from enemy units. Like a quick summary of Soulblight. I think most people know what the Soulblight Allegiance does, but in specific cases, this is why I love the Soulblight book. There's so many kind of stacking mechanical things on top of it that allow you to really design a lot of variations of lists, and none of them are necessarily bad. This is the problem with Soulblight. None of them are bad. None of them are great. And why I like this list specifically is because it's on the cusp of being amazing, basically, in my opinion, for the 2023 format. Just because it plays to the with Expert Conquer being gone and Proving Ground being gone, armies which have high attrition fighting mechanics with high volume count, model count, can be effectively very good on the table state in the second half, and they don't have to worry about the Proving Ground and Expert Conquer mechanics to basically prevent them from winning. So it's just even more. Well, they used to benefit themselves from it too. By losing it makes other armies worse effectively. Anyway, I'm keep getting sidetracked as I'm trying to describe this army into I think try to regurgitating too much information to the user. And I just assume if you're watching this video, you should already know what Soulblight does and Vyrkos does. Okay, going back to the list. Grand Strategy, Lost for Domination. That is the Grand Strat from the Soulblight book. You usually have to end the game by owning more grave sites than your opponent. And grave sites are scored just like objectives. You tally them up at the end of every turn if you have control of one, and then at the end of the game, if you have control more grave sites than your opponent, you get it. It requires some good positioning on grave sites. You typically want to have your two home grave sites in a place where it's they're relevant to the table but easily protectable, and then you want to have one in the center that's reachable as by army, but what I mean by center, something that's threatening to the objectives that are in no man's land. And then you want one that's kind of far away into your opponent's territory that threatens objectives if you get respawn units. So most of the time you're going to be fighting over the center one anyway, because that's where the objectives is, and your opponent's going to be trying to block you from the back one. So if in case you get a late respawn, typically they're not sitting on top of the objective, they're just trying to be 9 inches, making it hard for you to basically respawn on top of an objective. So anyway, it's a fairly easy grand strategy to score, and if you're losing the game very badly, you're probably giving it up. So it doesn't really. It's one of those things. It's grand strategies that basically you're losing because you're losing very badly. Then it doesn't really matter. Grand strategy, which are if the game is going kind of tie and they're easy to score, are very good. And this is one of those basically where you don't have to go out of your way to score it. It just kind of you just have to keep it in the back of your mind. All right, Triumph Inspired. That's the +1 to wound once per game. you're probably never going to get it because it's a 1990 list, but it's always nice to have in the back pocket. And the reason this list doesn't have Bloodthirsty, which I think would be superior in a more of an MSU build, is because the war command trait of the Wight King is an aura reroll charges. So that's a context of why we didn't pick that one. Let me take a sip of my coffee here and take a breath to after talking for a minute, like in a rabid state. All right, cool. And all right, next up is Radukar the Beast, also known as Radukar the Beast, which is his actual name. It's a Vyrkos list. You gotta take Radukar. He is effectively what's the word I would want to use for him the best way? He's an all threat, all American, I guess. War Scroll. He punches. He's fast. He has a lot of synergy of your army. Like he has built-in defense mechanism. He has healing mechanism. And I don't. He's like one of the. You can't go wrong with this guy, right? Like your opportunity cost for him is that he's 310 points. He's not a Galatian champion. And he's above the wound characteristic from being protected by line of sight from Wildwoods and Lokatzer and so forth and so forth. But like it doesn't matter. He comes with a native -1 to hit, so he has permanent Lokatzer basically, even in combat. He gets to run in charge of an 8-inch moving platform, which is amazing. He's a War Master for Vyrkos, meaning that he counts as a general for all intents and purposes. So 18-inch auras. For command abilities, he gives, if he's on the table and your general's dead, he still gives you command points. Like, fantastic. He hits kind of like a truck. Like it's, half of his attacks are, 3s and 3s, rent 1, 2 damage, but on 6 to hit, they do 2 mortal wounds and the attack sequence ends, and then 6 attacks at 3s and 3s -1 rend, D3 damage. From his attendants, it's quite a lot of attacks for this little single platform dude. But more importantly, he has like 2 command abilities, which are massive. He has the command ability to bring in 10 dire wolves. That's a 20 wound block for when at the end of any of your movement phase. That's really powerful. So when you subtract the cost of dire wolves to his price tag, it makes him less on like 200 points. It's a 200 point like melee fucking beat stick, effectively, with War Master, and on top of that, his second command ability, which is he can use in the combat phase. The turn he charges, he basically gives an 18-inch aura, a +1 attacks. So it makes him like 7 attacks on each of his profiles, and your entire rest of your army benefits from that too, with their whole even 18. It's pretty big on this most reduced tables, and the fact that the missions now, as we talked in the previous episode about objective to topography, you're going to be like almost hitting alt, like where you're going to be fighting effectively. It's a massive bonus to the army. You can't go wrong with him. Like he has defense, he has attack, he protects, he attacks, he moves fast, he gives you more units. Just like you can't go wrong with Radukar. He's such a good war scroll. We also took Belladamma in this list. She's such a cheap, powerful wizard. And what I mean by powerful wizard, she's +1 to cast, +1 to unbind. She's in Vyrkos, so she gets to reroll her cast rolls. She is also War Master for Vyrkos, which is great. Like, it's nice to have these War Masters on the table because your general, the Wight King, is most likely starting the game off the table. So it's nice to have that redone, I still get my command points even though my general was off the table. It's really nice. And she has some really powerful spells. One of it is basically an aura of 12 inches that give your army exploding to hits, exploding 6s to hit, giving you an additional hit. So it's not a mortal wound. Oh no, but it's an extra hit. So a synergy with Radukar, like you can get like the combo off. It's pretty nasty. That's a lot of hits and a lot of attacks, and it's just basically it's a very, very good force multiplier effect. And the investment is effectively not that expensive because once you subtract the dire wolves from Radukar, it's like less than 400 points in investment. Belladamma's second spell is that she can turn enemy models into wolves, kind of like the Tzeentch spawn mechanic. And that's really powerful because it can shut down certain shooting armies from overwatching. It gives you more this MSU kind of decentralized threat. It's more things to harass your opponent with. It's just a very good spell. It does, mortal wounds, gives you unit models. Like it's just obnoxious. The nice thing I like about it is it prevents redeploys too, which once when you're playing this army that's kind of like walking upfield, it's nice to be basically just say like, oh, just playing maybe 1 or 2 wounds here. I put this wolf here, and that basically can lock multiple units away from redeploying. Basically, if they're too close to each other. It's just a really nice and powerful like mechanic. Additionally, she has a very good defense mechanism too. She can pawn off wounds to direwolf packs. So most likely in the game, you're going to have 20 direwolves on the table between 1 and 10 Shadowcar and the 10 you start with. So cool. She's pretty redundantly powerful in defense. And then you give her Spirit Gale because it does mortal wounds, and it's just another spell. She's probably rarely going to use it. Most games I see, you're probably going to be casting Mystic Shield. And her exploding 6s to hit, and then sometimes you'll do the spawning the wolves thing. It's such a powerful like combo between her and Shadowcar. It's just so good. She's also very fast because she moves, I believe, 10 inches. If I remember off the top of my head. Okay, and she's not shabby in combat either. She's not great. She's basically like okay, but she heals. The hunger. So another little mechanic. Then we have our first JC, the Galatian champion, the Vampire Lord, with Pinions and fueled by Ghurish Rage. Just basically means that he can come back on when he dies. The reason I took him, and you'll notice he is in the Warlord Battalion as well. And there was a part of me that wanted him to put into the Galatian command, but I think the Warlord makes more sense than putting the Wight King in Galatian command. The idea behind him is it just gives you that initial, if you need to do the battle tactic where I think it's called Strike at the Opening. No, it's the one where if you have to start wholly outside of 3 inches of enemy units, and you have to score an objective that's wholly outside of your territory, and then be also 3 inches away. He just lets you score that one very easily. The problem with Soulblight Gravelords is they don't really have a lot of Galatian champion options, which are fast, and this is one of the only ones. So you're kind of stuck with that. And Vampire Lords are not bad. Like the only critique I have of them is that they're just they should have been probably 6 wounds instead of 5 wounds, and that's it. Because it's a 5 wound guy with a 3-up save, fly, level 1 wizard, 4 attacks, and 3s and 1 D3 damage. Like he's just all around okay. His command ability is not bad. It's another +1 to hit, +1 attack. And then start you can allocate to a unit, which is you can really double dip with if you just happen to have the command points. You can pop Shadowcar's 1 because it doesn't he targets himself with it. And then you can pop the Vampire Lord in another unit, so you can technically give a unit +2 attack, and then with exploding 6s. It's probably if you ever get that combo off, it's probably very unlikely that it's gonna happen and be like you're just like overkilling anything you're swinging into. Yeah, it's cool, sure. There was one little, I don't think they errated it yet. I think they should have, but I don't think they have. I can't remember the top of my head. The Vampire Lord command ability doesn't actually end until your next hero phase. So in the case of like you are the bottom of the turn, and then you trigger it on that combat phase, and then the next turn, the next battle round, your opponent goes top of the turn. I think it still continues on. So whatever unit you give, it gets +1 attack. I don't know if they've ever errated it yet. I wish they did, because it just why it seems cheeky. And then we have the Wight King on foot in this list, the second Galatian champion. If you watched the previous one of the previous episodes, I talk about like you probably don't need more than 2 Galatian champions in most games. And this one is really cool. I like this combo of him. It makes a Graveguard Battleline, which means they block for the Galatian shooting Galatian, which is not that I have a lot, but it's nice to have around. But really, why he makes the Graveguard's Battleline is because of the GHB new artifact called the Nightflyer Cloak, which allows you to basically deep strike this hero 9 inches away from enemy units as long as they're 1 inch of a battle line unit. So now all of a sudden there's a way to deliver a Wight King with the Graveguards. So not only is he a 90-point hero, but he's also a JC. He's also giving them reroll charges. If I really need his command ability, it's reroll 1s to hit in combat. Probably not. because they're going to be getting +1 hit from all attack, or +1 attack from the Vampire Lord, or with the they're probably not going to use that command ability very often, but it's nice to have. It's just another. He's there to give inspiring presence if I need it for the Graveguards. And finally, he has Stubborn as a Rhinox as an aspect of the champion, which is another GHB mechanic. He counts as 10 models an objective, as long as there's no enemy JCs on it. So cool. Like, it's just like he's kind of a nice little like purpose built, like, you reach out and bully an objective away from your opponent. On top of that, he's like coming with 20 Graveguards, who are effectively another vector threat you can have on the table. I think it's a really nice combo for like effectively like less than 400 points between the Graveguard and him. It's just like the opportunity investment or opportunity cost to that is very little. And if you ever play against Graveguards with great blades, like they hit like trucks. They're like really good. And in Vyrkos, like you kind of have to synchronize their charge with one of your Vyrkos vampires, so that way they get +1 wound against their target. You don't necessarily need it of all the extra attacks that can happen if you sync up your auras correctly. But like it is like if you want something dead, they will fucking kill it. Like that's just the way it is. And the nice thing is, when they die, they can come back. Because they're summonable. So they come back again. So it's not. I just Graveguard's like my favorite unit in that book. There are Inculation Command. My thought process behind that is so it opens up that battle tactic. There's one where you have to kill either a Galatian with Galatian or Swarm Protector unit with either a Galatian or Swarm Protector. So it gives you that opening. Like since they are Swarm Protectors, it gives you the ability to get that battle tactic if you basically clip a Galatian champion with them. The other thing is it allows you to swing if you fail to charge, and it's somehow because of coming in reserve, and somehow you get stuck in combat with them and they survive. You can activate the Wight King and them into the bottom of your hero phase, if you're bottom of the turn, so they can find in the hero phase, and that's very powerful for getting extra activations out of Graveguards is always very, very, very good. It's something Soulblight doesn't really have, right? So they already had the ability to activate immediately after their foot hero swing, so it wasn't like something new. The battalion doesn't really give them that, but having that extra activation is very powerful, I think, for them. The core BATTLELINE cons. Oh, I forgot Cado. Let's talk about why the hell Cado is in this list. I kind of covered it earlier. It's another decentralized threat. He basically gives you this kind of with Radukar, he gives you this additional threat vector on the sides that you can basically use. He's also just all around good. You can't go wrong with him. He's got some punch ability, he's got some movement ability, he's got some magic support. He has a pretty decent spell, like either doing D3 mortal wounds or bringing back models, summonable models into your army is always good. Like you can't go wrong with him per se. So it's just such an efficient like war scroll to have in any Soulblight list. I don't necessarily think he's like. I wish he was a JC. It would like if he was a JC, like Soulblight would be ready for the new edition, but no, he's not. And his hunger mechanic is much better than the other hunger mechanics, which I'm assuming when they do their death update for Soulblight, hunger will be like that for all vampires now, which is that he heals wounds immediately after he kills models versus at the end of the combat phase. There's pros and cons for both because if you're activating him first, you might already be you might be top of health, so it doesn't really matter. But I prefer it this way because it's consistently better, and also he heals more. He heals wounds based on how many wounds he's done, not on a D3 wound. So it heals more, but it doesn't trigger at the end, which sequencing matters. But I think it's better. So I hope they update it for all vampires effectively down the road. The BATTLELINE side. So we talked about the Graveguards, why they're there. The 2 blocks of 20 Deathrattle Skeletons. I love Deathrattle Skeletons over zombies and direwolves. I think in this edition they even got more value because Expert Conqueror is gone. So lots of basically like a 20-man block is a very good, basically scoring mechanism. They're very tanky. For those who don't know, skeletons have this mechanic. During the combat phase, if they lost any models during that combat phase, when they activate, they roll dice on the floor up, a skeleton comes back. So the reason why I like this mechanic is because it allows your opponent to have some counterplay to that. It's not so linear that you could just always get it. It's just basically you have to plan your what's the word I'm looking for? You have to force the activation, save that, kind of force the skeleton to activate before you swing into him, so that way they don't get to heal. So I like the counterplay mechanic, but also it's just a strong mechanic to have. And in an MSU situation like this army list is, you have a lot of activation in combat, so you typically get to activate the skeletons when you want to activate the skeleton, which is after they took damage. They come back. They're very durable for the point investment. 80 points for 10 wounds on a 5-up, a 6-up war that gets to reroll once with the banner. And yeah, they're not great in combat, but like the turns in which like you trigger the +1 attacks from Shadowcar and so forth, they're like they can do some damage against like most infantry blocks. Like they can do some wounds here and there. They're, like I said, not great, but they're like their job isn't to kill things. Their job is to screen, sit on objectives, make it annoying for your opponent to chew through. Yeah, they can be very annoying to kill. And then they're backed up by a corpse cart with the Bellfire Brazier, which basically makes enemy units where within 9 of it like -1 to wound, and that just drastically bumps up their resilience. And it's just that corpse cart is so annoying to deal with because you have to chew through all these skeletons or dire wolves are basically in the way, so it just becomes really hard to like get through it. And for 80 points, like I think you should always stay as many both corpse cart as you can in almost every Soulblight list if you can fit it. And so I'll go talk about them right now. The reason why the corpse carts are there: A, defense; B, bonus to casting and unbind for your wizards, which you have effectively 3, so it's nice. But it's also an 80-point, basically very big thing base-wise that like in the later game you can use to basically movement block with, because it's just a speed bump that you can block corridors. And it also, you can use it to, really push out like things that won't land near it. Like, it's just such a cheap investment for something that can add so much value to your army. It is slow, which is kind of a downside, but who cares? Who cares, right? Yeah, no, the corpse cards are just fantastic investments to take. The only problem is the model's ugly as sin, but you can convert your own. So I like them a lot. They're in an MSU build, they just feel right for a 160-point investment. You'll see a notice here. I keep talking about the point cost of things in this book. Everything is like super highly efficient in terms of price point. The only downside to Soulblight is they die very quickly, but they have all the attrition mechanic to come back. But they do kind of give up I guess units very effectively to like high burst units like Iron Jaws and so forth. But all it takes is like 5 skeletons to survive this activation, and then be able to like respawn 7 more, and then keep your opponent locked into combat, and then all that. You've basically they've done more work than they ever needed to do on the table. Preventing your opponent to dictate to be stuck in combat allows you to choose turn order when the next initiative roll comes up, because you're like, cool, you're stuck fighting skeletons. You can go. I'll give you a turn. You can kill the rest of them. I don't care. My threats will do what they need to do. And then it comes down to now the Vargskyr as the last talking point. I realize I'm already at 33 minutes. This is what I get. This is why I need to practice talking, because I try to convey too much information to folks. The Vargskyrs, why are they in the list? Well, firstly, it's a Vyrkos list, so why not? Yeah, but no, seriously, there's a reason behind the madness. You could probably replace them with a lot of other things, like if you were not running Discipleless and the concept into other like sub-legions, like Legion of Night and so forth. You could replace them with I forgot their name, the Bats, the Vargeist. Yeah, Vargeist, because Vargolf is the one. For sure, it's a little bit more expensive, a little bit more, about the same durability in concept, a little bit faster. Actually, their movement speed about the same as well when you consider the Vargskyr mechanic. Why Vargskyr? Okay, like I said earlier, I think in the episode I described how they have a nice synergy with the Shadowcar and Cado to allow you to kind of corner charge blocks of infantry with both one hero and the Vargskyr, which allows you to kind of pin those units into combat and lets you just beat on them while minimizing the amount of threats hitbacks you take. Vargskyr are pretty durable. They have a 5-up ward. They have 8 wounds. They have a 5-up save. In terms of like Soulblight durability, they're pretty nice. They sadly don't have the hunger, so they don't get to heal. But they have they have a pretty decent attack profile. 4 attacks, 2s and 3s, -1, 2 damage, and then 1 attack, 3s and 2s, I believe, -2, D3 damage. The nice thing is, like, having 2 attack profile, they benefit a lot from the +1 attack mechanic from Chad. And they're for 110 points. Like, I kind of think of them as like Soulblight Grimrafts, effectively. They don't get as much attack power, but they get more. They get double the speed. Like, they're effectively a Grimraft Berserker that doesn't get to activate twice, but gets to have massive reach. Their 8-inch movement. They get to charge 3d6, and they get to charge units within 18 inches of them. That's a huge ability, and on that at 15 mil base, I believe, to just basically kind of wheel around enemy units and get to stuff things behind if you need to. I've used them in a couple of games to effectively shut down my opponent's ability to like maneuver around as much as he wants to, because they just play such a nice disruption range, and that weird like 8 wounds with 5-up save, 5-up ward gives him enough durability to survive. So I can just, when the initiative roll happens, I'll be like, cool, you're kind of locked in by this stupid Vargskyr. Enjoy. And so they're really nice investment for this Russian plan. All right. I think that's the entire list. Covered pretty much everything. I don't think I talked about the direwolves, but I think it's pretty self-explanatory. The list is effectively 8 drops, I think, which is a pretty high count, right? Because it's 2 from Galatian Command, 4 from the Warlord, I believe. No, I made 2 units of Vargskyr and the Warlord, so 6, 5, so 7 plus 1, yeah, 8 drop. It's a pretty high drop count, but it's this army where like you don't really care if your opponent makes you go first, because you have kind of these all kind of like throwaway units you can kind of use. Like you summon 10 direwolves, you bump another 10 with the other 10. You got this nice like direwolf screen, or you can just use your Deathrattle Skeletons to do this. Like, I don't know. They don't really care too much about turn prio on the first initial turn, and it's always nice to have your opponent make you go first, because in some of these missions, like going second really benefits your game plan anyway. We talked about it before. Some of these missions really reward you for going second. So, having the top of the game turn means you could kind of dictate. You're more likely to win turn 2 prio. And in this situation, you kind of want an army that wants to get doubled, in a sense. This is definitely an army that wants to get doubled, or you're trying to play it to get doubled effectively, by setting redundant screens on points, and then having these heroes be able to tough it out over grind it out over the quarters of the game. I'm very happy with this list. I'm probably going to run it at on the GT in Seattle called Sparkle Death Party, which, if you can't notice, I'm wearing the Rolling Ones t-shirt here, which is another YouTube channel that makes great content for Age of Sigmar. Funny guys out of Seattle. I enjoy their company and their content a lot. So check them out if you can. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video explaining Soulblight. And if this is too long, I'm covering too many things, feel free to leave a comment to let me know. I'm still trying to learn what the best format to do these in. So yeah, hit me up, and I think subscribe, like, whatever, the button thing, and check out this other week's video regarding decentralized and centralized threat. Thanks a lot, guys.